I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related, both indoors and out, and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Roots and All podcast. I've been trying to pretend that Christmas isn't happening, and to be honest, the weather's been so mild up until the past few days, it really hasn't felt at all festive. But of course, Christmas is happening and I can't ignore it forever. So this week's episode has as much of a festive theme as I'm prepared to indulge in. I interviewed Tandy of Fibrex Nurseries a good few weeks ago because I wanted to make sure I had an episode in the bag that at least made a nod to Christmas, but also because I know Angela is one of the UK's experts on ivy. Ivy is one of those plants we all tend to take a little bit for granted, but it's a brilliant plant and I've always had a soft spot for it. But before the interview, I just wanted to let you know about the Roots and All Christmas opening hours. The next podcast is due out on Christmas Day, and I'm pleased to say there will be an episode that day. If you're having horticultural withdrawal symptoms during the holiday period, this episode may provide you with a little festive entertainment, so don't forget to tune in for that. I'll probably take a couple of weeks off at the beginning of January, and we'll be back again mid-January. I already have 3 interviews in the bag, so I'll be raring to go with those, and who knows, I might even release a bonus episode or 2 because I'm keen to get as much good content out to you as I can. So that's the housekeeping done. Now on with the interview. Angela, thank you for joining me, and I'm going to start by asking you questions about growing ivy indoors.
Okay.
I didn't expect that one. Are there any varieties that are suited to being grown indoors?
The only problem with ivy is that it's a hardy subject, so you have to grow it in a cool condition. The best ones are the hardy foreign ivies, which are the Algeriensis types, which are the ones that are generally sold as houseplants.
Right, okay.
And they do fine, but again, they need to be cool because the only thing that ivy really gets is red spider, and they get it from being hot and dry.
So if you were going to grow them indoors and you sort of had a problem with the red spider mites, what would be the best thing to do with them?
Well, if they've got red spider mite, chuck them outside because that will kill the red spider.
Yeah.
And you'd have to spray them because if it's warm outside, you're going to have problems.
Right, okay.
And they tend to lose all their leaves and look horrible. So cut them back, chuck away all the foliage and start again, basically.
Right, okay. I did actually go to a talk at a place that had a bathroom, and it was one of those bathrooms with absolutely no windows. You open the door and the light came on automatically.
Yeah.
And they had an ivy growing in there, and it was the most stunning thing I've ever seen. And it was trailing, I mean, I don't know how many feet, but it was going for miles.
Yeah.
Had they put it in there just for the purposes of the talk, or do you think it was genuinely growing in those conditions?
I suppose if it got decent light, because ivy does like shade, so it wouldn't want a lot of light.
Right.
So if people are in and out of the bathroom during the day, it would be getting enough light.
Really?
And it would have a nice sort of dampish atmosphere.
Yeah.
So, it probably does grow all right there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So actually...
Yeah, it would be worth a try.
Yeah. So if you had a cool spot indoors, that would be ideal for it.
Yeah, the problem is the heat.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And if you kept them indoors, would you need to feed them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to feed your ivies. You've got to keep them looking nice, and they always look best when they've got new growth. So keep them trimmed. It encourages new growth, and then feed them. We grow practically all of ours for show and stock in pots, and some of them have been in pots for 50 years.
Wow.
They're huge.
Yeah.
But they are fed every fortnight
Right.
through the growing season.
Yeah.
And they look lovely.
Okay.
But we have to keep trimming them because they grow. So it encourages new growth and encourages lots of work. But they do look nice.
Yeah.
So don't neglect them, otherwise they go all woody and horrible and you get not enough leaf to cover all the woody bits.
Right. And what do you feed them with?
It's just a general fertiliser, something like perhaps a houseplant fertiliser. They don't need a high potash one.
No.
I mean, if that's all you've got, that's fine. But they want a sort of more high nitrogen.
Okay.
But a balanced one, because you don't want it too high nitrogen, because if it's variegated, you'll lose the variegation.
Right. And this might be a silly question. When you say feed them during the growing season, what is the growing season for them?
It's usually about April to October. they sort of slow down and you think, oh, they'll be growing all winter. But no, they actually stop. You won't get any growth out of them through the winter.
Right.
And they don't like cold winds either. That can scorch the foliage.
Okay.
Cold wind, hanging baskets and things. So if we have a change in the weather and you've got them in hanging baskets outside, lift them down, because if they're blown about, they will dry out.
Right.
The trails will dry.
Okay. And how do you prune yours?
Well, you get some scissors or secateurs and you cut them back fairly hard.
Right.
The big stock plants, they get cut back in the winter quite hard. It's my brother's winter job and he moans like mad about it. It's sort of, I've got to pot the ivies. Well, get on with it. And they're cut back hard, and in the winter we repot them because they're all in pots. If you keep potting them on for 50 years, you won't be able to lift the pot. So we cut the roots.
Right.
So a lot of root pruning goes on.
Okay.
And they're put back into the same size pot with new compost.
Yeah.
And they sulk a bit and they drop all their leaves. And then in the spring, when they start to grow, they look fabulous because it's all new growth.
Interesting.
So you can be quite vicious and be vicious because they're better for it.
Right. And also, is there a reason why the two sorts of leaves are different? So the mature leaves are different to the juvenile leaves?
Well, yes, because the juvenile leaf is their climbing leaf. So they're small and they produce lots of leaves and they're climbing. When they change to their adult form, they're turning into a shrub, not a climbing shrub. They go to an ordinary shrub. So that's why when they change.
Right.
So they're not going to produce climbing foliage then.
Right. So if I had them in the garden, what sort of conditions do they prefer there?
They like it shady-ish, not too wet. They don't like a soggy place. They prefer it drier. And that's about all you need, really.
Okay. Do they all have the same growth habit?
No. Some of them have got little tiny leaves, and so you'll get a bushy habit. Some of them have got a viney habit, so you've got more stem than leaf, in effect, so the leaves don't cover the stems. Some of them are more trailers. They don't like to cling very well. Well, there are a few that are upright and don't cling to anything. Yeah, you sort of have to know your subject a bit to choose the right one. Yeah. Because some of them, if you plant it, it will never cover the wall. In 100 years, it will never cover because it's too slow. Some of them do actually stop at a certain height and others will just go on forever.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? I'm sure people buy them to cover
and there are
things.
some of them, and especially the foreign ivies, don't cling very well. So you put them against your wall and they will never climb. Wow. They need a hand. They produce lots of growth, but they just don't want to cling. Yeah. They're more sort of ramblers or scramblers.
Yeah, because I've got the upright one in my flower border. Yeah. And it's beautifully behaved and it's a really good plant.
Yeah. And you can use it for topiary and, like you would for a box or something like that as an edging plant.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because obviously they don't mind being clipped.
No.
They're tough as old boots, really.
And there is one called Very Merry, which actually looks like box and grows like box.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And is that fairly slow growing?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay. Are there any varieties that I should avoid if I've got a small garden?
Yeah. I would avoid any of the Hibernicas because they're too vigorous. Colchica and Algeriensis, all the big leaf stuff, are really vigorous. Unless you want a wall covered, quickly. Yeah. But you really do have to think about what you're planting. And anything that, say, is recommended for covering a wall or something, don't have it. Right. Because it's going to cause a lot of work, basically.
So that brings us on to the $1 million question. Do they destroy walls and pointing?
If you've got soft brick, where I come from, it's soft Cotswold stone. And I wouldn't put an ivy up that because it's porous. And so their little clingy roots can really hang on. And it's limey, which they love, limey soils. So they really like it and they cling hard. So I wouldn't plant it. But, proper bricks, it won't destroy it.
Right. If you could let it grow up into trees, can that cause a problem or does that again
The only thing that it does is, when ivy turns to adult and it starts to fruit and flower, it gets top heavy. And so the weight of it can pull over a weak dead tree. And that's generally what happens. And perhaps it is a way of clearing a forest or a wood, isn't it? You know, the ivy will actually pull the tree down.
Yeah.
And then it can move on to another one, in effect, when it's, you know, it's fallen. But it's only because of the weight. They don't actually kill it. It's just the weight of it will pull over a weak, dead tree.
Okay. Could you plant one as a ground cover in a border?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have to be a nice little neat one. There's one called Anita, which is a little sort of bird's foot shaped leaf. It's so pretty. And when it's grown as ground cover, it looks like moss. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's well behaved and you can clip it.
Yeah.
It's a good topiary one or slow ground cover. And the one called Spetchley is one of the slowest growing one. But it's gorgeous. I saw it at Witchford Pottery, which is near us. And they had it planted over. They'd got like a sculpture of a body lying on the ground. And they'd covered it in Spetchley. Oh, it looked fab.
Yeah. So it doesn't choke out your plants if you pick the right one.
Yeah, if you pick the right one and just don't let it run away.
No.
You know, you've got a garden ivy. You can't just plant it and leave it. Otherwise, it will take over. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not going to, you turn your back and it's going to be running away. You've just got to, once a year, check the ivy and deal with it.
Yeah. Just
don't leave it alone.
And just out of interest, if we did want to have something that absolutely romped away and we wanted to cover something quickly, what would you?
I would, it depends if you want a pretty leaf or if you want a traditional ivy. Traditionally, Hibernica. It is vigorous. It'll take wet conditions. It's known as the Irish ivy. It didn't originate in Ireland. It should really be known as the Atlantic ivy because it's all along the Atlantic seaboards, you know, in Europe, and it's everywhere. And it doesn't mind it wet, and it grows like mad.
So I think, again, pruning, same outdoors as indoors, the same sort of time?
Yeah.
And is there anything you need to be careful of with your timing of the pruning? I've seen
just do it.
Yeah, okay.
Just do it.
Because I've seen people say that they're good for, you know, late bees.
Well, yes, if you don't want to cut the flowers off until after they've flowered. I mean, when you're walking about, you can smell the ivy. It's really strong and the bees are in. And I keep bees. Right. Have you ever tried ivy honey? It is foul. It tastes like it smells, which I always think it's a bit strong. It's a bit weird smell. It's horrible.
Oh, no.
And it sets rock hard.
How funny.
It's awful. And it's not awfully useful for bees because it sets in the comb, so they can't actually use it. So you have to be careful that they don't have too much of it.
Right. That's fascinating. So is it just the honeybees that visit it at this time of the year?
No,
or
everything.
They all do?
Wasps, flies, hoverflies, everything is on it.
So it's good for wildlife then, presumably.
Oh, yes. And then if you leave the flowers to fruit, you know, they don't ripen up until, well, quite late. So it is a good crop for the birds in February, March.
Okay, so if you were going to leave the flowers and the fruit for the bees and birds, then you could chop it after that?
Be really hard because it will come back.
Yeah.
And that's the problem you get with ivy. People don't cut the flowering stuff off because they think it won't come back, but it will.
Okay.
Because ivy will fruit and flower when it hasn't got anywhere it can go. So it gets to the top of a wall or the sort of the thin branches of a tree where it can't climb, or it's a bit more light to it. And so it changes form and it'll flower and fruit. But it is a damn nuisance when it's really thick on the top of a wall. So you need to cut it back, right back to the wall, and it'll do the same again next year.
Yeah.
It's not going to be just one job you have to do.
No.
And sadly, you won't kill it, you know, which, you know, most people think. Well, most husbands think, oh, no, I can't kill this stuff.
If you did want to, I mean...
kill it?
Yeah. If I do want to remove it quickly from something, if it's really unwanted, I will just snip it at the base.
Yeah.
Is that the...
Yeah, that's what you need to do. Snip it from the base. And if you can, you've got to make sure that there's a gap between the ground and the stem, because ivy doesn't actually feed on the roots that it's clinging to the wall with, or the tree. So you need to let it dry. If it's been there a long time and it's thick, woody stems, your best bet is to leave it for a few months to dry out, and then you can pull it off without damaging the wall too much. But if you try and pull it off while it's green, that's when you do the damage.
Right, okay. And you did mention about growing it in containers. If you